Y'all. She exposed everything. What just hit the internet feels like a controlled explosion, calculated, devastating, and impossible to ignore. After years of whispers, side eyes, and locked doors, Tasha K allegedly stepped forward and ripped the curtain clean off a secret that was never supposed to breathe. According to her claims, Kandi didn't just hide a relationship. She allegedly lived a double life so carefully constructed that even the people closest to her never saw it coming. The allegation, a deep, long-running secret affair with Colman Domingo that allegedly overlapped with other relationships. Timelines crossing in ways that make your stomach drop. This wasn't a moment. This wasn't a rumor. Tasha claims it was years of silence, years of protection, years of truth buried under fame and carefully managed narratives. And then comes the part that allegedly shattered everything. When Riley Burrus was born, the public story was simple, clean, and safe. But behind the scenes, Tasha alleges something far darker. That the truth about Riley's biological father was deliberately concealed. The name given wasn't the name that mattered. And when an alleged DNA report surfaced later, it didn't just challenge a story, it detonated it. Sources claimed the fallout was brutal. Private conversations turned explosive. Family bonds reportedly cracked. And Riley, once shielded from the storm, allegedly found herself at the center of a truth she never asked for. Emotions ran high. Anger boiled over. Silence broke, and when Riley finally reacted, insiders say it wasn't quiet, it exploded. Now social media is on fire. Fans are torn between disbelief and heartbreak. Some are demanding answers. Others are questioning everything they thought they knew. Because if these allegations are true, this isn't just celebrity gossip. This is a tragedy built on secrets, identity, and years of deception. And the scariest part, Tasha K is hinting this is only the beginning. You were jealous. And a lot of women that do end up, and I know them, they bring people into their bedroom because they unintentionally but intentionally want to be the cool kid in school. They want to have the cool marriage. They want their boys to be able to say, my wife is cool. She let me be a woman. And you think it looks cool that you look cool, but really it's an insecurity. Buckle up. What you're about to hear isn't comfortable. It isn't neat. And it definitely isn't the version anyone was meant to believe. This is the kind of story that creeps out slowly, sits in your chest, and then hits all at once. Allegedly, every word of it inside this industry. Secrets don't disappear, they get delayed. And for years, this one stayed locked behind smiles, contracts, and carefully timed silence. According to allegations now circulating, Kandi didn't just protect a private relationship. She allegedly constructed an entire alternate reality. A long-running, deeply hidden affair with Colman Domingo carried out while other relationships publicly filled the frame. Not rumors whispered once. Not a fleeting mistake, but an alleged emotional bond that stretched across years, overlapping timelines that now raise questions nobody was prepared to ask. Sources alleged this wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. Every move calculated, public appearances polished, private conversations guarded. People close to the situation claimed there were moments when the truth almost slipped, then vanished again under rehearsed explanations. Fame has a way of smoothing rough edges. And allegedly, this secret survived because it was never allowed to crack. Then comes the most painful layer of all. When Riley Burrus entered the world, the story presented to everyone was simple and definitive. A name was given, a lineage declared, family members repeated it, the public accepted it. But behind closed doors, allegations suggest the truth was far more complicated. Tasha K now claims that the identity of Riley's biological father was knowingly misrepresented, not as a mistake, but as a decision made to preserve stability, image, and control. If true, this wasn't just about hiding a relationship. It was about shaping a life from day one. People close to the family allegedly say there were moments of hesitation. Flashes of guilt that surfaced and were quickly buried. The lie didn't grow overnight. It matured, hardened, became routine. Riley grew up believing one story while another sat quietly in the background, waiting for the worst possible moment to reveal itself. That moment allegedly arrived after the collapse of a marriage. According to claims now circulating, the end of Kandi and Todd's relationship wasn't just emotional, it was investigative. When trust evaporates, people start asking questions they avoided before. Allegedly, that's when documents surfaced. A DNA report. Quiet at first, then undeniable. The kind of paper that doesn't care about status or legacy. Sources claim when the results were revealed, the room didn't erupt. It froze. Shock doesn't always scream. Sometimes it silences everything. Allegedly, the report pointed to Colman Domingo as Riley's biological father, a truth that contradicted years of public narrative and private reassurance. From there, the fallout was unavoidable. Family members allegedly reacted in waves. Denial, anger, disbelief. Conversations reportedly turned sharp. Accusations replaced affection. And at the center of it all was Riley, now facing an identity crisis no child ever chooses. Insiders claim the emotional toll was immediate and heavy. The realization that your origin story may have been rewritten isn't something you process quietly. This is where Tasha K steps in. According to her, she didn't stumble onto the story. She followed it. She alleges she was tipped off, then shown pieces, messages, timelines, documents that painted a picture too consistent to ignore. She claims the DNA report wasn't a rumor. It was proof. And once she verified enough to feel confident, she made a decision that would ignite everything. When Tasha allegedly went public, it wasn't subtle. She didn't hint. She didn't tease. She was exposed. Names, context, alleged evidence. And with that, a family's most guarded secret was thrown into the open. The reaction was instant. Social media didn't debate. It detonated. Fans split into camps. Some refused to believe it, calling it impossible. Others felt betrayed, saying the pieces suddenly made sense. Old interviews resurfaced. Moments once ignored were reanalyzed. Silence became suspicious. Every non-response felt loud. And then there was Riley. Sources allege Riley's reaction wasn't private grief. It was explosive emotion, anger layered with heartbreak, confusion colliding with betrayal. People close to the situation claim Riley felt robbed of agency, of truth, of choice. Finding out he or through allegations and headlines is a trauma no amount of privilege erases. This is where the story turns tragic because if these claims are true, then everyone involved was protecting something different. One person protected image, another protected peace. Someone else protected a lie long enough that it became reality. And the one person with the most at stake was never given the truth until it was too late to soften the impact. Insiders allege attempts were made to contain the damage. Conversations behind the scenes, requests for silence, appeals to let it fade. But once a secret reaches daylight, it doesn't crawl back. It burns. The courtroom-style tension now surrounding the situation isn't legal yet, but it's emotional. Everyone is on trial in the court of public opinion. Motives questioned, timelines dissected, words weighed for what they avoided saying. And through it all, one question hangs heavy. If this secret could be kept for so long, what else was hidden? Tasha K insists this story matters not because it's shocking, but because it's human. Allegedly, she says it's about truth delayed becoming truth weaponized. About a child growing up inside a narrative that wasn't theirs. About adults making decisions that echo for decades. Whether every detail holds or not, the damage is already visible. Reputations are strained, relationships are fractured, and Riley's name is now attached to a controversy she never created. Fans say the saddest part isn't the affair allegations, it's the silence that followed, the years where honesty might have changed everything. And this is only part one. Because according to those watching closely, more receipts may surface, more voices may speak, more contradictions may collapse under scrutiny. What was once sealed is now exposed to light. And light has a way of revealing more than anyone intended. This isn't just gossip. It's a warning about secrets wrapped in power, about truths postponed until they become unbearable. And as this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. Nothing about this will ever be the same again. What followed next, according to people close to the situation, wasn't chaos. It was collapsed. The kind that happens quietly at first behind closed doors where voices lower and trust evaporates. Allegedly, the moment the truth became unavoidable, alliances shifted. People who once protected the narrative reportedly began protecting themselves. Silence turned strategic. Statements were delayed and every pause felt intentional. Insiders claim Riley didn't just question the story she'd been told. She questioned every memory attached to it. Birthdays, conversations, reassurances that now sounded rehearsed. Sources say the emotional weight wasn't just anger. It was grief. Grief for a truth withheld. Grief for an identity shaped by omission. And grief doesn't stay polite for long. According to allegations, Riley confronted the people she trusted most, demanding answers that no longer came easily. The explanations reportedly didn't land. Words like protection and timing felt hollow when stacked against years of silence. Those close to Riley say the realization hit hardest when she understood the lie wasn't accidental. It was maintained. Meanwhile, the pressure around Kandi reportedly intensified, publicly composed, privately unraveling. Sources alleged that once the DNA revelation surfaced, there was no way to rewind. Every attempt to minimize it only magnified suspicion. Fans noticed the shift. Interviews became guarded. Social media activity thinned. The absence of denial spoke louder than any statement. This is where the situation began to resemble a courtroom without a judge. Every past interview became evidence. Every old clip was replayed with new context. Viewers dissected body language, pauses, and wording. What once sounded confident now sounded cautious. What once felt transparent now felt edited. Online analysts questioned timelines, pointing out overlaps that allegedly aligned too cleanly to dismiss. And at the center of the storm stood Colman Domingo, silent, distant, unmoving. Sources claim his absence from the conversation fueled even more speculation. No confirmation, no denial, just distance. In situations like this, silence becomes its own testimony. Fans argued over meaning. Was it respect, legal caution, or something deeper? The lack of response only sharpened the narrative forming around him. Tasha K, however, didn't retreat. According to her claims, she doubled down. She alleged that what she revealed was only a fraction of what she had seen. Messages, dates, conversations that allegedly supported her version of events. She insisted the truth wasn't messy, it was documented, and once documentation exists, it doesn't fade quietly. Sources say Tasha framed the story not as scandal, but as consequence. A consequence of choosing secrecy over honesty, of choosing image over impact. She allegedly argued that this wasn't about tearing someone down. It was about exposing a truth that had already done damage behind the scenes. The emotional toll, insiders claim, began spilling outward. Family members reportedly stopped speaking. Long-standing relationships froze. People chose sides without saying so. And Riley, now forced into the public eye for reasons unrelated to her own actions, allegedly struggled with the weight of being the focal point of a narrative she never consented to. Fans noticed the shift in her demeanor, the distance, the restraint. People close to Riley say the anger eventually gave way to something heavier, resignation. Because once the truth surfaces publicly, there's no private space left to process it. And that's where the tragedy deepens. Because according to allegations, the truth could have been told quietly years earlier before identities were clarified. Before expectations solidified, before a young woman had to discover her origin through whispers and headlines instead of honesty. The damage, sources claim, isn't just emotional, it's foundational. The public, however, rarely pauses for nuance. As the story gained traction, commentary turned ruthless. Sympathy mixed with judgment. Some defended Kandi, arguing survival in an unforgiving industry requires hard choices. Others condemned the deception outright, saying no level of success justifies rewriting a child's truth. The debate grew louder, harsher, less forgiving by the hour. Behind the scenes, insiders alleged crisis management efforts kicked in. Advisors, strategists, carefully worded silence. But once a story reaches this level, control becomes an illusion. The narrative moves faster than anyone can contain it. What made the situation more volatile, according to sources, was the sense that more people knew than admitted. Whispers suggested this secret wasn't held by one person alone. That protection required participation, and participation creates accountability that spreads. That's when old acquaintances allegedly began speaking off record. Not to confirm, but to suggest, to hint at moments that felt off, to reference conversations that now made sense. None of it definitive, but together it painted a picture too consistent to ignore. Riley's alleged reaction to this realization was described as raw. Sources claimed she didn't just feel lied to, she felt managed, like a storyline instead of a person. The emotional fallout reportedly affected her relationships, her sense of grounding, her ability to trust narratives presented to her. When your own origin becomes disputed, certainty becomes fragile. And still no formal denial arrived. The absence became deafening. Fans waited. Commentators speculated. Silence stretched. And in the vacuum, the story solidified into something heavier than gossip. It became a belief. Not because it was proven beyond doubt, but because it was never meaningfully challenged. Tasha K, watching the reaction unfold, allegedly stated that this was exactly why secrets are dangerous. Not because they eventually surface, but because of how they surface explosively, publicly, without mercy. As the days passed, the narrative shifted from revelation to reckoning. People stopped asking if it was true and started asking why it was hidden, why the truth was delayed, why the person most affected was the last to know. Those questions once asked don't fade easily. And for Riley, according to those close to her, the hardest part wasn't the public noise. It was the private realization that parts of her life may have been constructed to serve someone else's stability. This story isn't slowing down because as scrutiny increases, inconsistencies become louder. And when silence continues, assumptions harden. Allegedly, more voices are preparing to speak, more context waiting to surface, more pressure building behind the scenes. What started as a reveal has now become a reckoning with truth, identity, and consequence. And as this unfolds, one reality is unavoidable. The fallout is no longer hypothetical. It's happening in real time. And the question everyone is now asking isn't what happened. It's who knew and how long they were willing to let it continue. What happens next, according to sources watching closely, is the slow unraveling that no statement can stop. Because once the question of who knew enters the conversation, every relationship connected to the truth comes under scrutiny. Allegedly, private calls were made. Explanations attempted. But explanations don't undo years. They only reveal how carefully those years were managed. Insiders claim Riley reached a breaking point not because of what was revealed, but because of what followed, the justifications, the soft language, the reframing of deception as protection. When truth finally appears, it doesn't want context. It wants accountability. And those close to Riley say the emotional distance that followed was immediate and irreversible. According to allegations, Riley began pulling back from everyone involved in shaping the narrative of her life. Not out of spite, but survival. Trust, once fractured, doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly. Conversations become brief. Visits become rare. The connection that once felt unconditional starts to feel transactional. Meanwhile, public pressure intensified. Commentators began asking why no one stepped in sooner, why silence was chosen repeatedly, why a child's truth was postponed until it became a spectacle. The questions didn't accuse one person. They accused a system of protection built around image and convenience. Sources alleged Kandi felt the weight of the shift immediately. Not just online, but personally. Friends distanced themselves. Support became conditional. The absence of clear denial continued to haunt every appearance. Each moment of quiet added fuel to a narrative now beyond control. And then there's the allegation that changed the tone entirely. Insiders claim Riley confronted the idea that her entire upbringing may have been structured around maintaining a version of reality that wasn't hers. That realization, sources say, didn't cause rage, it caused mourning. Mourning for a childhood shaped by omission. Mourning for conversations that never happened. mourning for the right to know herself fully. This is where the story turns from scandal to tragedy. Because if these claims hold weight, then the damage isn't limited to reputations. It's generational. It affects identity, belonging, and trust in ways no public apology can repair. A secret kept for years doesn't disappear when revealed. It transforms into a lifelong reckoning. Social media, however, moved faster than healing. Clips circulated. Old statements resurfaced. Fans dissected everything from tone to timing. Sympathy was selective. Judgment relentless. In the court of public opinion, nuance rarely survives. People chose sides not based on evidence, but emotion. And emotion demanded resolution. Behind the scenes, according to sources, the strain reached its peak. Attempts to stabilize the situation allegedly failed because the truth once introduced demanded more truth. And more truth meant more people exposed. Whispers suggested additional confirmations existed. Not public yet, not denied either, just hovering. The kind of information that doesn't need to be released to be felt. Silence around it became intentional, heavy, strategic. Tasha K, watching the fallout, allegedly stood by her claims. Sources say she framed the situation as a warning, not a victory. She reportedly stated that stories like this don't end when exposed. They echo. They follow families, shape futures, and leave scars invisible to outsiders. Her position wasn't about reaction. It was about responsibility. The emotional toll on Riley, according to insiders, continued to deepen. They claimed she struggled with the idea that her truth was negotiated without her consent. That decisions were made about her identity by people prioritizing stability over honesty. The sense of betrayal, sources say, wasn't loud, it was heavy. The kind that sits in silence and rewrites how you see everyone. Fans began noticing subtle changes, less engagement, more distance, a guarded presence that hadn't existed before. People close to Riley say she wasn't trying to perform grief. She was trying to survive it. And still, no definitive clarification arrived. That absence became the loudest voice in the room. The longer it lasted, the more final the narrative felt. Not because it was proven beyond doubt, but because nothing challenged it with force. In public discourse, silence is rarely neutral. It becomes interpreted, assumed, solidified. Sources allege this is when the situation crossed a line. From controversy into legacy-altering territory. Because once a story becomes embedded in public memory, it doesn't require confirmation to persist. It becomes part of how people remember, reference, and retell. Careers absorb it. Families carry it. Children inherit its weight. The tragedy, according to those closest to the situation, is that this outcome was avoidable, not by denying the truth, but by telling it earlier, privately, honestly, without cameras or commentary. The delay, they say, is what turned a personal truth into a public wound. As the story now stands, the damage isn't theoretical. It's visible in fractured relationships, altered dynamics, and a young woman forced to reconcile her identity under public scrutiny. That isn't entertainment. That's consequence. The public may eventually move on. News cycles always do. But for those at the center of this, the reckoning doesn't end with attention fading. It lives on in family gatherings that feel different. Conversations that never happen again. Trust that never fully returns. And perhaps that's the hardest truth of all. Because secrets kept in the name of protection often ends up causing the most harm. They don't shield. They delay. And when they finally surface, they take more than they give. This story isn't about who wins the narrative. It's about who lost years of truth and what that loss costs for the rest of a lifetime. If you're still watching, understand this isn't just another headline you scroll past and forget. This is one of those stories that stays with you because it forces a question nobody likes asking. How many truths are we willing to sacrifice to protect an image? What you've heard isn't comfortable. And that's exactly why it matters. Because behind the fame, the applause, and the carefully managed silence, there's a human cost that never trends the way scandal does. Right now, people are choosing sides without knowing everything, defending narratives that may have been built on years of omission. And that's how history gets rewritten in real time. If these allegations are even partially true, then this isn't about gossip. It's about accountability, identity, and a young woman forced to confront her truth under the harshest spotlight imaginable. This is where you come in. Don't just consume the drama, question it. Ask why silence lasted so long. Ask who benefited from it. Ask why the person most affected was the last to know. Because when audiences stop asking questions, powerful stories get buried exactly where they were meant to stay. If this shook you, share it. If it angered you, comment. If it makes you uncomfortable, stay uncomfortable. That's where truth usually lives. Stories like this don't survive because they're entertaining. They survive because people refuse to let them disappear. And remember this, fame fades, narrative shift, but the consequences of hidden truths don't. They linger long after the cameras move on. Stay alert, stay critical, and don't let silence finish what secrecy started.